Director Clapper, thank you so much for joining me. First, about what Sarah Sanders specifically said yesterday. She said they, meaning you and others, have politicized and in some cases monetized their public service. I want to ask you point blank, sir, have you made any money since leaving office using your security clearance?
Well, not directly the security clearance, but I guess, I have benefited from the 50 years of service, both in the military and in civilian capacities in the intelligence community. I wrote a book about it, and I appear on this network, and it's, by virtue of that experience. Well, a part of that, of course, is the eligibility for access to classified information. And so, in a sense, yes, I've benefited from that experience.
But currently, are you? Meaning, if you didn't have your intelligence, your security clearance, rather, right now, would you be saying the same things, writing the same book, making the same arguments? Absolutely.
I don't. What this involves is my eligibility for access, which I've had since continuously since September of 1963. But it has no whether or not I have actual exposure to classified information on a daily basis or get briefings or anything like that. Absolutely not. And this revocation, if that's what it turns out to be, would have no bearing whatsoever on what I'm doing, saying, or writing about, and and Mike Hayden's in the same situation.
You just said that you've had security clearance since 1963. So what, since John F. Kennedy was president?
Exactly.
So for people not in the intelligence world, people who are not familiar with the way the government works, can you just explain why you and others maintain that clearance, even though you have retired from the government?
Well, the rationale, and this is a long-standing practice that goes back decades, that senior formers from these positions are granted continued eligibility for access to classified information. And this is to facilitate consultation with those who are occupying or are the current incumbents. And so I've had occasion to engage with senior members of this administration who, for obvious reasons, will remain nameless, drawing on my, 50 years of experience and my corporate memory and my background on certain issues.
So you help them out. You help out members of the current president's operation, the current president's government.
Yes. I have, and at their behest, at their request. Now, will the republic collapse if I no longer have that eligibility? Absolutely not. And to me, though, this is a side issue. The bigger issue to me is the jeopardy to First Amendment rights. That to me is a much bigger issue here, where we're being suppressed or oppressed because of our outspoken political views or criticism of the current president.
Well, I'm grateful that you're still coming on and speaking your mind. I want to talk about General Michael Flynn, because he ran the Defense Intelligence Agency. He maintained his security clearance after retiring and got really political on behalf of now President Trump back in 2016. Remember this? Let's watch.
Lock her up. That's right. That's right. Lock her up. I'm going to tell you what. It's unbelievable.
Okay, so that was him getting blatantly political. Not just that, General Flynn made $33,750 in the private sector from Russia's state TV station. Speaking in Moscow in 2015, he also made $11,250 from a Russian charter cargo airline, $11,250 from a Russian-based cybersecurity firm. He clearly monetized from and by the Russians. He had a security clearance. You were Director of National Security, Director of National Intelligence at the time, Director Clapper. Was there any discussion when listening to that, when seeing the kind of money he made from Russia, of revoking his security clearance?
No, there wasn't. And Mike, he took advantage of his long experience in the intelligence and the military by forming a company, the Flynn Intelligence Group, which was the platform or vehicle for profiting from his past experience. So the obvious ironies here and the obvious double standard, I think, kind of speaks for itself. But when he became very overtly and publicly political, anti-Obama administration, there was never a thought about, ending his eligibility for classified information because he became politically active. Absolutely not.
All right, and what we're looking at are pictures of Michael Flynn at a dinner with Vladimir Putin back when he was in the private sector making money. Last question. It's been 8 days since the president met with Vladimir Putin, and the only readout we've gotten from their 2-hour one-on-one meeting is from the Russians. What do you make of that as somebody who has been in the intelligence world, in the National Security Forum for 50 years?
Well, it's worrisome against the backdrop of the president's continued ambiguity about recognizing, calling out unambiguously and clearly the extensive Russian meddling in our election and in our political processes. So juxtaposed against that ambiguity, that reluctance for whatever reason, and then the mystery about just what it is he discussed with Putin in private and what he may have or not conceded, as an American citizen, I find that very bothersome, very worrisome.
James Clapper, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dana.
And let's continue to discuss this with CNN politics reporter and editor-at-large Chris Cillizza and CNN political analyst Jackie Kucinich, who is also the Washington bureau chief for the Daily Beast. You didn't get the memo for the floral dresses.
I know, what the
I would
heck?
call you a
I
skunk at the garden party, but I would never say that to you.
Never on that email list.
In all seriousness, what did you make of what you just heard from James Clapper?
Well, I think the most important thing he said, Dana, is that the Republic, in his words, isn't going to collapse if James Clapper doesn't have a security clearance. But he then went on to say the most important thing, which is this isn't about Clapper, Hayden, or Comey. This is about free speech and your ability as a citizen, forget as a former intelligence official,
such an important point.
as a citizen to speak your mind. The thing to remember, there's no allegation of wrongdoing, as far as I can tell, by the Trump administration directed at these 6 people. They're not saying they leak classified information or they're using their access to classified information to get out in the public. They're saying they're critical of the president and they're saying that there's some ties to Russia and Donald Trump doesn't like that and therefore they're going to revoke their security clearance. It doesn't mean they can't speak publicly, but there's why? I think it's meant to chill free speech, and that, I think, Director Clapper nailed. That's the most important thing. That's our takeaway. Whether it's a distraction from Russia that Trump means or not, chilling free speech is something we need to take seriously.
No question. I mean, it's a very, very dangerous road to go down. I will say I think there's a little bit of irony in the fact that Donald Trump is saying that they monetized they're monetizing their situation, and they already have books out. And by raising the profile of James Clapper and James Comey, you're probably helping them monetize it even more, helping them sell books.
They also aren't really unique in the fact that they left administration and wrote a book. I mean, that is sort of what ex-officials do. I'm having a hard time thinking of a high-ranking official that hasn't left and written some manner of book. So that sort of falls flat. I think this is twofold. This is a way to change the headlines. The president doesn't want to talk about a relationship with Putin. Several of these individuals that he named, Susan Rice, James Comey, McCabe, these are villains on the right already. These are people that he can set himself up with, and he can go to a rally today and rattle them off, and his supporters know who it is. They'll jeer.
It's easy raw meat.
It's easy. They are easy people to put up as adversaries to Donald Trump. That said, he's not doing that with someone like Vladimir Putin. that is also something we should keep talking about, because that is someone who has been an adversary on the U.S. stage, and the president has tried to cozy up on it. People aren't buying that.
And on that point, I want you all to listen to what Congressman Mike Kaufman told Armanu Raju about this issue of Putin. He is an incumbent Republican who is about the most, if one of the most, if not the most, endangered when it comes to November's election. Listen to what he said.
Well, I think the first summit was a terrible mistake. I think the second summit would be equally bad. I mean, the fact is that the president went to Europe, and I think he was, strong when it came to talking to our allies and weak when it came to Putin. And weakness invites aggression. And also very concerned about him meeting alone with Putin.
Do you think that he got played by Putin?
Absolutely.
I mean, you certainly have a number of Republicans, the majority of Republicans, reluctant to say that. But the fact that this is a Republican who is going to rely on not just the Republican base, but independent voters in order to win re-election, and he's being that tough, that could tell you something.
Yeah, look, I think there are a lot of signs as it relates to the election in 105 days that Democrats are as well positioned as they've been since the start of this election. And a lot of that has to do with independents and Donald Trump. And I think what you saw, do I think that people follow foreign policy super closely? No. Everything we know about politics suggests they don't. But they do follow something like the summit. And where Donald Trump was, his whole MO is, I'll be tough. I'll face down our adversaries. He does it to some extent in Iran and North Korea, but when standing next to Vladimir Putin, he said, well, we're to blame and Russia is to blame.
Jackie, you walked the halls of Congress for many years. When you hear that, what do you think?
I think it remains to be seen how this affects Donald Trump going forward, because a lot of Republicans have latched on to when President Trump has been successfully wrangled by his handlers, and he's gone back and said, "Oh no, they're absolutely." The Russians absolutely did meddle in the elections. They latch onto that, not his backtracking, but they do have, because people don't follow the tweets day to day. The midterms will be either a reckoning or a all systems go for Donald Trump's current strategy. We'll just have to see what voters say at that time, because we are still 100 days out. I think it remains to be seen if there are consequences. If there are, you might see them change course.
100 days is an eternity in politics, as we all know.
Yeah.
Jackie, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.